This is a 1/50th scale model of Franklin Barbecue in Austin, Texas. And this video is the story of how this scale model came to be here in my studio, but also how I cooked one of the best briskets of my life following the recipes of Aaron Franklin, aka Barbecue Jesus, on Masterclass. I'm gonna take everything that Aaron Franklin teaches about brisket in his Masterclass and distill it down and adapt it for use on an inexpensive offset smoker like my Oklahoma Joe's. So let's get smoking. A month ago, my brother-in-law tagged me on this Masterclass contest on Instagram. In order to win the contest, you had to take a photo of your best barbecue that was inspired by Aaron Franklin's Masterclass. The prize for the contest was for 5 winners to have a lunchtime session with Aaron Franklin and ask him any questions that they wanted. And I had one very big question to ask Aaron in particular. The question, does he actually use beef tallow on his briskets? Now, I don't care if he does. I don't think it's cheating or anything, but ever since Jeremy over at Mad Scientist Barbecue suggested that Aaron Franklin uses beef tallow on his briskets, I had to know the truth. And also, I'm just a huge Aaron Franklin fanboy and I just wanted to meet him. He's Barbecue Jesus. But there's a problem. With a newborn baby and a full-time job, I just didn't have time for this contest. So I ignored it for a few days, but then I called someone for advice.
How long is it going to take you to do it?
Probably like 100 hours.
It doesn't matter whether you got to meet him or didn't get to meet him. You're doing it because you're going to focus on the process, regardless whether you make it to see him or not. It's not the real issue. The real issue is that you went ahead and did it.
And that was that. You can't go wrong with dad advice. So I came up with a plan. One of the contest criteria was creativity of presentation, and it said that Aaron would be judging the entries. So my plan was to pull on his heartstrings by effortlessly building a scale model of Franklin Barbecue in Austin, Texas, using my elite model building skills that I learned in the Army. I would then smoke a brisket on my offset smoker perfectly according to Aaron's instructions, slice it, place it in front of the model, and snap a photo. After winning the contest, I'd win the prize of meeting him, and he'd tell me all of his secrets and also settle once and for all whether he uses tallow on his briskets. Then I'd become his protege, and our kids would hang out, and our wives would be best friends. So, now that I had a plan, I went to building the actual model. Unfortunately, I don't actually have any model building experience because I spent all my time in the military playing Guitar Hero. But I do have some other skills. I know how to use SketchUp, which is a 3D design tool. And it just so happens that I work for a tech company that generates interactive design-ready 3D models from aerial measurements. So I ordered one of Franklin Barbecue. Now with the measurements in hand, I translated them into SketchUp so I could modify the model as necessary. Then I scaled it down and printed out the measurements, cut the shapes out of balsa wood, got some help from a friend who paints D&D miniatures to paint it, and then I glued little people on for a finishing touch. No problem, just took me about 80 hours while I neglected all of my family responsibilities, and it turned into a big issue actually. At this point it was becoming really hard because I was kind of neglecting my family and I was ignoring my responsibilities as a father and a good partner to my wife, and that's what I'm learning being a new dad. Like, you can't just hustle and pour hours into projects anymore. You have to focus on being more efficient, you have to focus on your family, and some of those other things you have to push to the wayside. And this was definitely a project that I didn't have to do, but I was spending a ton of time doing it and it was really affecting my relationship with my wife.
Is it worth it?
I don't know. We'll find out. If I win the contest, it'll be worth it. Anyway, I knew it was wrong, but I ended up choosing to be irresponsible. I was just clinging on to the hope that once this was all over, I would win the contest, it would all be worth it, I would meet Aaron Franklin, I'd ask him this question, I'd be able to make a great YouTube video of it, and then, you know, I'd get tons of views and my wife would be fine with everything that I did to sacrifice all that time. because something good actually came of it. Now with the model in hand, I set to work smoking the brisket using Aaron's Masterclass method. I'll post the full process in the description section below, but I just want to mention a few points of how I adapted his method for a smaller offset smoker. First point, Aaron aims to keep his temperatures within plus or minus a few degrees of his target temperature zone. He sees this as a challenge and he controls his temperature with the exhaust vent open and the intake vent wide open, and he just controls it by adding new splits to the fire and anticipating when one is going to go out then he adds another one to add more heat and maintain a constant temperature. Now this will work in a smaller offset smoker like the Oklahoma Joe's, but you just need to know a few techniques. I'm gonna make a more in-depth video about this one day, but in summary, you need to use very small, dry splits of wood to manage your fire, and you need to add them probably every 15 to 20 minutes. And you might need to crack open your firebox lid once in a while if the temperature spikes too far above what you're aiming for. That'll let the excess heat out and it will allow you to maintain more consistent temperatures. The other thing is, if the temperature drops too low, you might have to replenish your coal bed with a new chimney of lit coals so that your splits keep on catching and you can maintain that steady temperature. With this method, I was able to maintain my target temperatures within about plus or minus 5 degrees, but it took a lot of attention and effort. Realistically, if you're about plus or minus 15 to 25 degrees Fahrenheit, it's not gonna make a huge difference. Let's say you're going from 225 to 275, over time, but you're averaging about 250, that's okay. It's not gonna ruin your brisket or anything. The problem comes in is if you're trying to aim for like 290 and your temperature spikes up to like 325. That's a big no-no. You can't do that. You need to dial in your temperatures better when they're at that higher temperature zone. Second point, Aaron has this concept of ramping up temperatures in stages that I think is really interesting, and you can use it on a smaller offset smoker like the Oklahoma Joe's. First, he starts at 255 degrees Fahrenheit for about 3 hours just to gradually bring the brisket up to temperature, start it to sweat out a little bit of moisture, because if he starts too high at the beginning, he might really dry out the bark. And if he dries out the bark too much at the beginning, then that, according to his opinion, he might ruin the brisket or ruin the bark, and it will be unrecoverable when you go in later stages. It'll probably still taste good, but the bark just won't be at the point where he wants it. Then at the 3 hour mark, he ramps up to 265. He starts spritzing the edges of the brisket again, just to keep the bark nice and soft and so it doesn't dry out. And at the 7 hour mark, he ramps it up even higher to 280 degrees Fahrenheit because at this point, the brisket has hit the stall. It's evaporating a lot more moisture and it's protecting itself from the heat. It's protecting that bark from the heat because it's got a lot more moisture content in it. So it can afford to handle a little bit of a higher temperature, which will speed up the process and power through the stall. Well, it's raining and these Crocs aren't very waterproof, but you gotta do what you gotta do. Only after the stall is over, so only when the moisture stops pooling on top of the brisket will he then wrap the brisket, which is counterintuitive to how a lot of people teach it, because a lot of people say you wrap to power through the stall, but he actually waits until the end of the stall because he wants to take that brisket bark a little bit further, make it a little bit crispier, so by the time he puts it in the butcher's paper, it is going to back off a little bit, become a little bit softer, but still come out really nice and crispy. If he wraps too early, he's gonna get too much moisture in the wrap, and that's gonna ruin the bark and make it soggy. And then after wrapping, he ramps up the temperature even higher to 290 because now that it's wrapped, it can take that higher temperature. And I think he also does that because he wants to finish faster and also fully render the fat. And to render that fat properly, you kind of need a higher temperature. The last point I found really interesting in Aaron's masterclass was he said you can just finish the brisket in the oven after you wrap it if you really want to. And I think this should actually be the standard way of cooking a brisket on a smaller offset smoker. It's harder to maintain the temperature on a smaller offset smoker. The fuel is expensive. You've got to use charcoal and wood, and that comes at a cost. So it's much better to just put it in the oven. You can forget about it. And the other thing I like about this method is that the first 7 hours before I put it in the oven and wrap it, I can really concentrate on dialing in the temperatures. I can have a few beers, but not too many. I can enjoy the day, but really just concentrate on getting the bark where I want it. And then after that, I can pop it in the oven, forget about it, spend some time with the family, and then I can come back after 2 hours and finish it. And I can, you know, have a couple more beers. It doesn't really matter at that point because I don't need to concentrate as much. After everything was sliced, I set up my brisket in front of the model and I took the shot that would hopefully win me the contest. Then I submitted my contest write-up and waited for the results. All right, guys, it's the day of the contest announcement and I just received this email from Masterclass. Hey there, Casey here from Masterclass. We want to thank you for participating, blah, 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 blown away by submissions. After much deliberation, we have selected 5 winners. What's next? We'd love your feedback. Okay, well, it looks like I did not win this. So, okay. That sucks. let's look who did win. It looks like 5 people won this contest, and none of them are me. Winners are, okay, brisket, some short ribs. So it looks like beef ribs or pork ribs. Okay, cool. Well, yeah, happy for these guys, actually. Just sucks that I didn't win, I guess. So I may not have won the contest, but I didn't mention what I did with the brisket after I cooked it. The next day, I actually shared that brisket with my family for what was my first Father's Day ever. Can you repeat what you said about the brisket earlier?
I want brisket, brisket, brisket.
That's unusable.
It was a really special day, and I have to say it was probably one of the best briskets I've ever cooked. I think that me wanting to do this whole contest thing was a little bit of me wanting to be accepted into barbecue culture, feeling like I was a part of it. As a Canadian, I feel really distanced from it, and I think like making this model was a way for me to kind of touch barbecue culture and feel like I was part of it, even though I couldn't physically go there. But I did it in a really unhealthy way, in a way that I wasn't owning up to my responsibilities to my family. Through all this, I've learned that I don't have to go to Franklin Barbecue or meet Aaron Franklin to be part of barbecue culture, because it's all around me. It's in the way my family enjoys my barbecue and the good times we have. It's the connection I have with you guys who are watching this, and our shared love of good food and good times with family. In other words, Barbecue Jesus doesn't live in here, he lives in here. Thanks so much, guys. Happy smoking.